It's really good to be here. I want to thank Mike and his team for inviting me. As he mentioned, I lived in Cleveland for 4 years. I went to college at Case, just around the corner, and it's just awesome to be home. It's awesome to see what's happened in this city over the last 10 years. Really exciting, a lot of growth. And speaking of growth, I'm here to talk about our journey at Optimizely from a small self-service SaaS product to an enterprise software company. And when I started thinking about this, I asked myself a simple question: what does enterprise even mean? And it's not actually obvious. So there's kind of an obvious answer you could give, which is that an enterprise software company sells software to large companies or enterprises, but I don't think that really captures what enterprise means. So I was digging through some of my old emails. This is an email that I sent back in 2011 to a member of the Starbucks web team after they signed up for a subscription to our product, Optimizely. And this is about 6 months after we launched. And Starbucks is, by any definition, an enterprise company. But this email is kind of proof that selling software to an enterprise company does not make you an enterprise software company. For one thing, they were only paying us $70 a month, $80, I think. And then for another thing, if you want more evidence, just count the number of exclamation points in the subject line, which is Pete from Optimizely reaching out, "We love Starbucks," in parentheses. I've learned over the years that how enterprise you are as a company is inversely related to the number of exclamation points you put in the subjects of your emails. So we were selling software to enterprise companies, but we weren't an enterprise software company. And I talked to a bunch of the folks who've been at Optimizely for a long time, and I reflected on this. And what I came to is that we've always had enterprise customers, but we didn't always have enterprise relationships with these customers. And understanding this has been a slow evolution in the way we build our product, and the way we sell it, and the way we market it, and the way we support it. It's taken a lot of years, taken a lot of mistakes, and a lot of learning. And I'm going to use that story today to talk about what we've learned along the way. And I think it's actually a story about defining our target customer. When I look back, a lot of our biggest problems came along because we had gaps in our definition for who our target customer was. And a lot of the times that we kind of made a step function increase, it was because we revised that definition in some way, or deepened it, or something along those lines. And that brings me to the first lesson. I think this is the biggest lesson that I've learned as an entrepreneur and as a product manager, which is that everything follows from your target customer definition. I think this story is going to kind of come back to this over and over again. But I'm going to start with just some background. So, as I mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Optimizely. My co-founder, Dan, and I met back in Google in the mid-2000s. And Dan left about 2 years after we met to join the Obama campaign. This is back in 2007. And he and his team on the campaign ran a whole bunch of what are called A/B tests. And I'm going to assume that almost everybody here is probably familiar at this point with what A/B tests are, but this is a simple example. And they ran a test by displaying one of these splash images randomly to each incoming visitor, and then measuring which one got more visitors to sign up. And of course, more signups meant more people you could email. That was more people you could get donations from or get to volunteer for the campaign. So this had a huge impact. And when Dan came back after the campaign, we started a couple companies that failed, and eventually we came back to this idea of A/B testing. And the insight that we had is really Dan's idea, and to his credit, was that it was really valuable, but it was also really hard to do. And so we thought we could make it easier, and this is what we launched with in late 2010. So this is our website. This is A/B testing you'll actually use. It's very simple. And when I thought about our target customer at the time, we had a pretty simple model. We asked 2 questions. 1, do you have a website? And 2, can you pay us money? And I'm really only half joking. It's like we didn't actually write this down. But when you look at the way we built the product and the way we sold it, this is kind of what we were using as our guide. And that's not actually a bad thing, right? Well, first of all, when that's your target customer definition, your addressable market is huge. So that's a positive. And having ambiguity in the definition gave us a lot of room to experiment with our business model and our product. And that's what we did. So this is our first pricing page. Again, so you can see just evidence here of how not enterprise we were in the support plan we had for our enterprise tier, Platinum, which is just giving them Dan's phone number. We figured what more could they want? So we sold subscription software. We broke it down into 4 tiers. We had bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And if you were interested in bronze through gold, you could swipe a card and you could start using the software that day. But if you wanted our enterprise option, platinum, you had to give us a call. And that's really how we started this journey and this experimentation. One of my favorite stories from that time is, so Dan and I were very closely involved in every prospective customer. And we had kind of a running competition between the two of us to see who could close the biggest deal. And I remember Dan coming out of a sales meeting one time. He was super excited because the customer really was just loving the demo that he was giving. And he said that every time the customer said something good or indicated that they're impressed, he sort of silently added another $1,000 a month to the price in his head. And when the customer said at the end of the call, okay, how much? He said, I just took a deep breath, and I said, $10,000 a month. And I was floored because that was like 5 times the value of the highest contract we'd signed to that date. And I was like, wow, do you think they're going to close? And he's like, well, we negotiated it down to $2,000 a month, but yeah, I think they're going to close. So he spent a lot of time during this period experimenting with different price points, different feature sets, and it really gave us flexibility to understand the direction we should go in. And I'm going to gloss over a whole bunch here because this model actually carried us for years. So we went through tremendous growth as a company. We learned a lot of hard lessons about selling and organizing a sales team, about building teams in general. But this model really started to show cracks several years later. And I think the best example of this is, so we started selling to customers, and we started selling bigger and bigger deals to customers that we didn't really fundamentally understand. So my favorite example of this is we signed a deal at one point with a large satellite TV provider. It was $20,000 a month, which I think was at the time the biggest deal we'd ever signed. So it was a big deal, literally. And into that deal, we built kind of an opt-out period after 3 months. That was helpful in getting customers to sign the deals. And sure enough, after 3 months, they opted out, so they fired us. And it was a watershed moment. And in the conversations afterwards with the customer, we said, what happened? And it turns out that they had actually just signed the deal so that they could kind of bake us off with one of our competitors. And for us, the whole idea that you would pay $60,000 just to decide whether you wanted to use software was totally foreign. It was a measure of how little we understood about how our customers actually operated. And I think the biggest symptom of this was churn. So we were still growing very quickly, but we weren't retaining enough of our customers. And so we sat down, we had kind of an existential crisis, and we started by looking at the customers that we had that were most successful and trying to figure out what are the characteristics that they all have in common. And we came up with 2. The first one we called cloud friendliness. That was this idea that you were willing as a business to put cloud software on your website. And the second one we called attributable monetization. This is the idea that you could directly attribute your revenue back to your website. And we built a model, and that model gave every company a score for cloud friendliness. We used data, we used a service, actually it's an amazing service called Built With. They track SaaS product usage. And it also gave every company a score for attributable monetization. And for that we used, as a proxy, I think we used industry and Alexa rank and just revenue. And with that, we had a way to start qualifying, does this customer fit into our target customer profile? So for example, media and retail very often have both of these things in common, right? They're usually pretty willing to use SaaS products, and they have a lot of attributable revenue, almost all of it, in fact. Now, on the other hand, something like CPG, they have a lot of web traffic, and usually they're pretty cloud friendly, but it's very hard to tie that web traffic back to their revenue. Their websites are more branding vehicles. On the other hand, financial services, again, in some cases a lot of web traffic, and it's very monetizable, but they're very heavily regulated, and we as a business weren't ready to support them yet. They weren't cloud friendly. So now we had a simple way to say yes to everything in the top right and no to everything else. This was our second real definition of our target customer. And we actually built this model, right? This is a screenshot of the model we built, and you could plug any company into this. We use the Alexa rankings. And we built a whole database using this model. We used that to segment our go-to-market function. We reorganized our sales team. This was a really big step. We also took a step up market with this. So this was our new pricing page. And you can see we got rid of our credit card plans. So the customers who were signing up with a credit card tended to be, they cost a lot to support. And so what we did was we pushed those customers to a free plan, which gave them access to the product they wanted to use, but sort of let us off the hook of some of the support costs. And we pushed everybody else to an enterprise package. So this model really helped us grow as a business, but it had a severe drawback. And that is customer empathy using a database. So while this gave us a new way to structure our sales team, and it gave us a way to think about our go-to-market function, it was very hard as a product manager or product team to take this model and understand how it should impact our roadmap. And you can see in the top right-hand corner, there's a lot of variety. So even just media and retail, a large media company has very different needs from a large retail company. Furthermore, there's an awful lot that's in that upper right-hand corner, right? It's another very big addressable market. So while we now had strategy and direction for go-to-market, we were still really lacking on the product area, or on the product side, for a kind of an inspiration for the direction we wanted to go in. So we sat down again as an executive team, and one of our new CFO at the time, David Schwartzbach, led us through an amazing process. And we wrote down, over the course of several weeks, a 3-year ambition and strategy. And in this document, we wrote down a new definition for our target customer. We wrote down a strategy for approaching them. And I'm not going to go into detail. There's a lot in there. But I will mention our objective here. So our objective, we said, was for teams that spend the most on digital advertising to consider us the essential solution for optimizing digital experiences. And a couple of things I want to draw out there. The focus on teams. So we'd gone far enough market that our focus could no longer be on the single practitioner individual using the software. We had to focus on the team of people around them. We also used digital advertising as a proxy for that attributable monetization quality. But this still doesn't add a lot of specificity to the model, and so we took one big step further, and I think this is the one that made all the difference. We took a list of about 20 customers, and we decided that they would be our strategic customers. They occupied different verticals, but each one of them was aspirational in some way for us, and each one of them viewed experimentation as a critical business process, so an essential process. And we made it our highest priority to make these strategic customers successful. So one example is the New York Times. They're an iconic media company. They're going through a very turbulent time in the industry, and they're going through their own digital transformation. And writing this list of strategic customers gave us something else, and that was actual human beings to focus on. So now, instead of a large group of companies, we had a small group of human beings that we could sit down with and talk to. And that was enough to start building the real kind of customer empathy you need to build true enterprise relationships. So we worked really hard with Matt and his team, and one of our big milestones was when one of our employees actually got a badge to the New York Times headquarters, and they actually gave him an office. That was a measure of how much closer we had gotten to our target customer. So the framework now, where it started with really a list of what our SVP of sales, Travis, calls target customer companies, we expanded that. And it now included target customer humans. And it had a huge impact on the business. It changed the way that we built our product in ways that we didn't expect as well. So another example, one of our strategic customers, Microsoft. Our target customer human at Microsoft is Beth. And I remember on one of our early sales calls with Beth, we had been talking about a feature that we were going to build, I think called Intelligent Snippets. And Beth asked us when it would be ready. And the product manager, John, on the call, sort of got quiet for a second. And it turns, I mean, we hadn't even scoped this thing yet. And so John kind of awkwardly sort of stammered that we hope to have something ready maybe by the end of the year. And then everything got really quiet. And after a few seconds, Beth just kind of goes, "Is that how you guys operate?" And it was a lesson because she was just floored that we would actually talk about a feature with a customer like this without really deeply understanding how we were going to build it and when it was going to be delivered. And shortly after this moment, we adopted our first of what we call a customer fixed date commitment. So we ended up making a promise to Beth about when and how we would build this feature. And we had to change the way that we operated as an engineering team and a product team in order to deliver this. So these target customer humans served as kind of a forcing function for us to grow as an organization. They became our sounding boards for everything that we were building. And they also served as kind of examples and inspirations in every internal communication. So every deck now would end up featuring one or more of our target customer humans. It was an extremely valuable tool for our product team. They even really helped shift our focus as a company. So we started learning about the roles of people like Beth, and we saw them as executives who were agents of change in their companies. So they were running programs, experimentation programs inside their companies, evangelizing experimentation within the company. And we ended up refocusing Optimizely on experimentation. We launched what we call an experimentation platform. And in that platform, we focused on several individuals on these teams. So marketers were able to use our web product to run A/B tests on websites and personalization campaigns. We also built a product called Full Stack, which enabled developers to run experiments everywhere that they could run code. And we built tools for analysts who wanted to understand the impact that these experiments had on their business. And together, these people formed an experimentation team. That's how we think about them. But this is when we started learning about an additional dimension that hadn't really factored into the way we built product up until that point. So Beth at Microsoft operated a team at the center of a whole bunch of experimentation teams. Her experimentation program spanned dozens of teams at Microsoft. And this created a whole class of problems for Beth that we hadn't really spent time thinking about up until that point as a product team. She had to manage coordination between these teams. She had to manage a large backlog and allocation of resources. She had to manage executive communications. And she started using a product built by a company out of Austin, Texas called Experiment Engine. And what they did was they actually built the product on top of our developer APIs to help Beth run her experimentation program. So she gave, when I say she, I mean Claire Vaux, their amazing CEO and founder, she gave them a tool for managing the workflow for experimentation within a team. And she also gave Beth tools that she needed to have visibility and control over the entire experimentation program. And deeply understanding this brought us to another lesson about enterprise software sales. And that was, if you're building a product for an individual, your job is to help them solve a problem. But if you're building for an organization, your job is to help them create a system for solving problems. So we had to start thinking at this level in order to really deeply help Beth solve her problems. So now we've expanded our framework. We started with target customer companies. We then deepened our understanding to target customer humans inside those companies whom we sell to and who use our software. We then had to expand our thinking to include a target customer organization. And that target customer organization is the system that all of these target customers, humans, use to work together. It's their reporting structure, it's their incentives, it's the way that they work together, the way they hand things off, it's their workflow. So that's our target customer organization. So that really brings us back, I think, to that core lesson, which has been a constant theme for me through this difficult and amazing journey that starting and building a company has been, which is that everything really follows from your target customer definition. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.